Welcome back. We're here on Tech on Deck, and we have a really unique little interview here. One of my close friends and neighbors, Mary Ann Davidson, is here to talk to us about a wide range of topics. Mary Ann is the Chief Security Officer for a very well-known company, but she is not here on behalf of that company, so we're not going to name that company. But we're going to talk about her experiences, wide-ranging as they may be. So, Mary Ann, welcome to Tech on Deck with Robert Scoble and me.
It's great to be here.
Yeah,
You got the best view on the planet, or one of them.
well, we really do, and it's been a great experience. So, tell us a little bit about leadership, because you lead a lot of people.
Well, let her introduce herself, because the audience has no clue who she
I'm
is,
a little
and how long her career's been, and what she's done in this world.
You can tell Robert's interviewed a lot more people than I have.
So we when we were talking earlier, we were talking about leadership, and I mean, I have a particular interest in that because I was a military officer in a previous life, as they say. In fact, my sister and I were two of the very first women in our specialty in the Navy, and that's when. And the military is much better now, but they were just starting to integrate women in a lot of different specialties. And there was a law that prevented women from being in certain combatant roles, so you kind of were butting up against the limits of what the law would allow. And so you had certain things like we're actually in military construction battalions, and you'd have things like, well, we can't let women be in the CBs, the construction battalions, because we'll have to build separate toilets. Really? You're construction people? Is this a problem for you? So, and so I actually think very fondly of my days in the service, because I tell people everything I learned about leadership I learned in the Navy. And a lot of people confuse leadership and management, and they're very different. And a lot of corporations, they sort of think of, they manage people, which for some people means manipulating people into getting them to do what you want. And I don't think that's not leadership at all. Leadership is talking about why we're going to go take that hill, and why it's necessary, and motivating people to go do it. And to do that, you have to show that you are going to basically support your people. And that's, again, counterintuitive, as opposed to you take the hill and I take all the credit. No. You got to make sure your people are taken care of, because they are the ones who are going to be doing that work. So you're only really as good as the people willing to work for you, and with you.
Dig into that in your career. Where have you seen that tension between leadership and management? Give me some stories, maybe.
Well, I'll give you
names.
I'll give you one, and I think it's interesting. And the military has a very different kind of metric for who gets promoted. And I'm not saying that they're perfect, and sometimes you don't get somebody who's a jackass who gets to a level they probably shouldn't be at. But one of the things, for example, the Navy looks at is if you're the skipper of a ship, and the reenlistment rate is low, meaning the sailors only sign up for maybe 3 or 4 increments, whatever it is. And if they don't reenlist at a particularly good rate, they take that as an indication of poor leadership. Like, hey, get me out of here. I don't want to be in this unit anymore. I don't want to be on the ship anymore. So that's part of what they measure you on. I mean, are you inspiring people who are going to want to continue to be in the service? So I've seen corporations where people burn through 100% of the people on their team a year, and kept getting promoted because they looked at, well, the results were, oh, this guy was a big marketing genius, and we did this and he did that. I was like, yeah, but you're not looking at the cost to the company of burning through all those people. That person's a toxic person and should never be in that kind of position. And finally, years later, they caught on, but only after how many good people were just totally quit because they couldn't stand working for somebody that toxic. So that's one example. And I always tell my team, and some of my team has been around long enough to know who this individual was. Like, if I ever act like that person did, please kick me in the rear end or another sensitive part of my anatomy, because I don't want to be that person. And actually, the guys who work for me, they would do that, which is good. Really, that's what you need.
What did you do in the Navy?
I was in the Navy Civil Engineer Corps, which is basically they do public works, manage construction contracts, and they are in these mobile construction battalions. So if you've ever seen the John Wayne movie, The Fighting Seabees, they're out there, with the Marines in the Pacific in World War II, building airstrips as the Marines are taking islands, and basically their motto is "We build, we fight." They've got like an arc welder in one hand and a gun in the other. So,
my executive assistant, Autumn, I'm sorry she's not here. She is a Black Hawk helicopter pilot, and I was so impressed, because I have to believe that they have been trained, in that role, not only to be super smart, but to be able to deal with a lot of chaos. And as you can see from what we've put together here, you might not see it, the audience, but there is a lot of chaos behind the scenes. And being able to deal with that under pressure, and already I can tell that she's got some real management skills and leadership skills that is going to help immensely. And so.
What are you doing here in Sun Valley, and how do you know this guy?
I think we met through dogs.
Yeah, yeah, it's a very
So a lot of
dog-friendly
people-
town.
Because you're working for a Silicon Valley company.
Well,
right?
it's just kind of a strange serendipity thing. I came here, and by the way, I'm not really a super big skier, and I do like skiing. I'm much more of a surfer, and most people say, well, how much surfing is there in Sun Valley? And the answer is not so good. But I was here on a ski vacation, and with my sister and brother and I would meet to ski every year. And then when we came to Sun Valley, my partner, now late partner, decided he didn't want to go back to Sun Valley, or to San Francisco rather. So he didn't, and he talked me into buying a house. I thought, well, why not? And then I changed my residence after a few years because I realized, and I went to my company and said, I'm paying to fly myself back and forth to be here and there, and would you all consider letting me just change my residence and I can work remotely? And sure, why not? Because my team is all over the globe. We've never all been together at once. And that's the miracle of the internet. You can for a lot of jobs, you can be almost anywhere as long as you've got a good internet connection.
Well, this is the only interview that we're doing not using Cisco, because up until now all of our other guests have been remote and using Cisco's teleconferencing system to enable us to do that. That's what half the people are here doing. And do you feel that it has presented challenges for you by commuting in this fashion? Are you able to lead as effectively remotely?
Well, I think so. I think some people cannot, and this would be true whether you were just not going into the office, but it was 2 blocks away. Some people, if they work out of the house, the distractions are too great. I would think particularly if you have small children or a lot of noisy dogs or whatever it is, or oh wait, oh I got to dust that over there, I got to run the vacuum too. It's very easy to get distracted, so you have to be kind of a disciplined person. Otherwise, you aren't going to be very effective.
Do you have strict hours, like you are working from 8 to 5 or whatever those hours are, and because it is tough.
Silicon Valley executive, she works her
Well,
fair
no,
90 hours.
I think that's no, I think it's a good question. I have
it is.
lots of other interests that I like to pursue, so I'm disciplined about those too. And like people who live here, why is everybody such a good skier? It's not because they only go up twice a year, right? Or I see people out there on those. They're like Nordic skis, only got wheels on them, so they're practicing for the Nordic ski season already. So I'm disciplined like that as well about the things that I do that are not work related. But in order to do that, you have to be disciplined about work. So yes, I'm not saying it's rigid hours. Sometimes I'll do something later at night, or if I go out and do I take a longer lunch because I'm walking the dog, then I'll make sure that I get through the work I need to do for the day.
I found when I first started the business, like so many other startups, I started in my house, and I had no idea of when to start and stop. It was just all on all the time, and it wasn't until we moved into official offices that I could find those boundaries. And ironically, 14 years later, here I am working effectively in my home office because 12 steps down is my business, and the way I've created it, I actually feel less involved in business 12 steps away than I did when I lived a mile down the road. So it's interesting.
Because you can switch back and
Yeah,
forth.
yeah. If I want to go to work, Laura says, you go to work. Get your work out of the home. And at some point it would be, as part of this, we should take a video tour and show people.
Yeah.
But also, frankly, the commutes are so awful in so many places now that I figure I'm getting 3 hours a day back.
You really
from
are.
not sitting, not to mention the amount of, I tell people the commute is really bad, and I think of all the unladylike language I'm using. I was a sailor, so I know how to swear like a sailor. Not that I'm giving you a sample. And it's just my quality of life is better.
Yeah.
And I'm happier. I'm not as witchy when I'm on the phone with people because I'm more relaxed. I can get out and you see, I saw a bald eagle the other day in my backyard. How exciting is that? And when you have a day like that, boy, there's not much that can go wrong in your day after you see a bald eagle or an elk or something wonderful.
Lived here 11 years, haven't seen one bald eagle yet. Will you send him over here?
I usually see them in winter,
Really?
so I was surprised to see them.
So you're a chief security officer. What is that? What is that? The role involved with chief security officer?
It's actually different in different companies. And some companies have CSOs and some have CISOs, Chief Information Security Officer. Sometimes it's a Chief Risk Officer. There's no kind of description. Sometimes people have both physical security for their business and the IT part of security. Sometimes they only have one. It's just, it's all over the map. For what I do, it's a little different because although there is a lot of network to protect, my focus is actually making sure that we engineer security into our software and our services, whether they're cloud services or things that consultants build. And in order to do that, you set up a program to basically teach very smart developers who didn't learn this in universities, how do you think about security? Because you're building things that people run their businesses on or sometimes critical infrastructure. You really have an obligation to make sure that's pretty darn rock solid. So you have to, unfortunately, because universities don't teach this, it's like civil engineers not learning structures, but they don't teach it. And most large software and hardware vendors have to have programs like this.
Yeah, when I worked at Microsoft, they had to train all the engineers. They had a book this thick on how to do security software with a lower attack surfaces.
Yeah, lower defects and that exactly. And you basically want to teach people to think like hackers. And it's just really interesting because for a long time there's this massive state of denial, like, oh, no one would ever do that. Like somebody reports a problem, you'd say, okay, you fixed the exact manifestation of that problem, but you didn't really solve the problem because you didn't think about how else that person could do something bad. Control X makes the stack fall over. Oh, great, you check for Control X. What about Control Y, Control Z, Control A? Oh, well, no one would do that. Yeah, they're going to be back next week. So, yeah, it's just a different mentality. You don't have this with people in the military. You don't have to tell the Marines that somebody's going to attack them. They kind of know that.
Yeah.
But unfortunately,
we're getting used to that in society, though. You see the targets, you see Sony getting a really ripped apart by hackers. The companies now have to be rebuilt to be defensible against outside and internal attacks. Because I've interviewed, thanks to this program, I've interviewed a couple of companies who are building security software, and they said they've caught many employees ripping off the employee from inside the company, right?
More often
stealing,
than not,
stealing intellectual property through tunnels that they built. Nerds who are building, tunnels at defense contractors and other things, sending data out to the Chinese, right?
well, there's it's kind of like somebody asked, was it Willie Sutton, I guess, the famous bank robber, why he robbed banks? He said, that's where the money is. Well, why do people hack into stuff? And it's not just, in the old days it was, I'm going to deface your website and make you look foolish. Well, not anymore. What could you possibly, credit card numbers, intellectual property, there's all kinds of juicy stuff. And why would I want to physically go, into somebody's building and try to steal that if I can just sit at home in my flip-flops and, my t-shirt and Aloha shorts and do it remotely? Why
Did
not?
your heart skip a beat this morning when the news of the New York Stock Exchange, the trading issues, happened? I know for me, it did, as to the impact of security generally on.
Well, and United was down this morning.
Yeah,
too.
it looked like.
So
it might have been
we
connected.
start making up things. What's going on out there, right?
Yeah, I don't have any insights on that, but I saw that Ford just recalled something like 400,000 cars, and again, they're putting software everywhere. I'm not saying this is bad, but again, that's the complexity of this stuff. And unfortunately, people want to do things like, let's put a sensor in your refrigerator so it can order new milk when your milk is spoiled. I said, okay, here's the problem with that. Right now, if I want to, rob your house, I want to know whether you're here or not. So if I can just scan your refrigerator and I realize you haven't opened the door in 5 days, one of three things is true. Either you're on a strange diet, or you kicked the bucket and you're on the kitchen floor, or you're actually not home, despite what your lights might be doing. So yours might be a good house to rob. And I'm sure the people designing these things are not thinking about that.
That's interesting.
How has the industry changed from your viewpoint in the past 10 years or 15 years? From my viewpoint, I talk to a lot of startups, and startups are getting much easier to start. And I'm seeing startups springing up in Kentucky and Tennessee and all over the world. That certainly didn't happen 15 years ago because of the expense and the talent that you needed to start a new company. From your viewpoint inside a major big company, how has the industry changed?
Well, I mean, there are a couple of things. One of them is, again, particularly sitting where I sit, when I started working in security, I always tell people, you remember the old Maytag repairman commercial where it was like he was the loneliest guy in town, they would never call and they'd never write because they were so reliable. So it was a Maytag repairman, the loneliest guy in town. Well, that's what it was like working in security because hardly anybody cared what we did. You know, maybe, you know, 3-letter government agencies did and the Defense Department, but other than that, nobody really asked any questions about your security. That's not true anymore. This is front and center. You know, you open up the paper and it says there's a virus going around and you don't immediately think it's a cold. You probably think, oh, probably a computer virus. So that's one thing. Security is just front and center and almost, I spend probably about 10% of my time at least talking to customers about how they can have confidence in what we do, which is good, if challenging. The second thing is, of course, growth of cloud services, right? People used to buy software and install it and manage it themselves, and people ran their businesses on it, and you find that there is a shortage of good geeks, right? It's like a lot of things. It's, I don't do my own car repair. You can get somebody else to do that for you. So a lot of people are, instead of running their own infrastructure, they're using somebody else's, which is great. It's probably more economical.
We're talking to rack space in
exactly.
an hour or so. So yeah.
And the other one, you're talking about a lot of startups, is, and this is not something I'm directly involved in except as an observer, is a lot of the social media companies. And some of this stuff, again, probably because I'm not in the younger generation and I'm kind of cynical when I hear people say, oh, and we're going to have all these business applications that are going to be mobile, social enabled. And I thought, I don't really know what that means. I mean, does that mean you're going to tweet everybody that you just closed a big deal? I mean, maybe there is there, but these companies are experiencing growth. So hey. Yeah. Who can argue with success?
Mark Zuckerberg, I talked to him, and he answered back instantly. I go, oh, it's nice that you're answering back guys like me. He goes, I run my entire business on Facebook. I'm like, I don't see you running your business on Facebook, so you must have a private Facebook. Yeah. I'm building a private Facebook, a Facebook where I can talk to employees, all the Facebook employees, in real time and do work with them, and he's hardly alone, right? We have Yammers, we went to a company a week ago that's doing collaborative software. You use Basecamp, right, to run your business. So anyway,
I'm not addicted to it because there's so many things I like to do, and that can be a real distraction. But let's face it, I think probably all of us say, it's really nice to be able to. I have a friend, I used to work for my company in Israel, and it's not, and I haven't been there in a few years, so it's really nice to be able to keep up with her. And it's a little nicer on that, some of the social media things than, just email. So, or you can find people easily, maybe you don't have their email, so there are a lot of nice things about it.
You've reached the top of the ladder in Silicon Valley as a woman. Do you have any tips for other women that are listening here as to how there are so few women that have reached your level, it seems, or a lot of talk that they haven't, or barriers?
Well, it's funny. I have a friend who started a group for women who are in information security, and she started it by having a discussion with somebody who was a big security kahuna at one of the banks in New York. He said, "Oh, there aren't any women doing this." And she said, "Yes, there are." She said, "No, they're not." So she took out a cocktail napkin and started writing names, another one. So, and her. And by the time she was done with this full cocktail napkin, she says, "I'm onto something." And so she started a group for women executives in information security. So actually, they're more than you would think.
Interesting.
So in terms of advice, I guess.
Yeah, I just interviewed a woman who runs a business in cybersecurity. So there's quite a few.
It takes a lot to get comfortable in your own skin, but I just feel like I'm lucky that I had people who gave me opportunities and believed in me, including, by the way, my father. I mean, when I was growing up, a little different, not that so many women out having careers, and my father has always been just as proud of his daughters as of his son. And so having people who believe in you and believing in yourself and being willing to take risks, that's what surfing did for me, getting back to other. Surfing is about taking risks. And a friend of mine said, she wasn't trying to be profound, but it was profound. She said, you can take off on a bigger wave than you think you can. And I've always remembered that when I'm out in the water and something comes through, it looks like it's a little above my comfort level. I'm going to go for it. I'm going to go for it. Not stupidly. And that confidence is what, got me a lot of my professional success. Because I thought about that. Like, yeah, I can take a bigger wave than I think I can. And if you wipe out, well, there's another wave coming through. Because people fail. Some of you, that's what, there is no risk taking without the risk of failure.
That's true. And you learn from your failures. I mean, if everything's a success, you don't learn. I mean, you learn when you fail not to do that same thing over again or to do something much different.
No, we're trying a new thing.
And yeah,
it's
we
great.
take notes every day.
After every session, he pulls me aside. What did we learn? what did you do? And he
what will we do
critiques me, and I critique him. And
It's great.
each other, yeah, pretty soon,
You even got logos, so you've arrived.
Yeah, well, that's all it takes. When we first started, that's the very first thing I did. In marketing and branding, it's important. The perception.
Swag, very important.
Yeah, you'll notice there's a lot of swag going on, and you'll leave with a Tech on Deck swag kit. So.
Well, it's really great. It's a great event, and I look forward to hearing maybe next year or the following year that, well, everybody knows that Sun Valley in the summer, well, it's all about Tech on Deck.
Well, thanks for joining us.
Well, thank you.
We really appreciate it.
I enjoyed it.
Come back, and for the next session, what do we have coming up with the rack space?
Yeah, we have the CTO rack space.
That'll be good.
One of my bosses.
Oh, very nice.
Got to get paid. But it's not every day you get to talk to CTO of major public companies. So we're going to have some interesting conversations about that. Yeah.
So I want to thank Ustream for providing the broadband live streaming. Cisco, of course, for the teleconferencing. Rackspace for bringing Robert out here.
Well, and for providing a lot of business infrastructure, 300,000 customers.
New Tech for the TriCaster, Syringa for the broadband, and of course, Scotty Vest for the clothing in the pockets.
I mean, look at these pockets, I mean, how many iPhones do you have in your pocket?
You lost a couple in there.
I did, actually. You know what? It's hard to get them out sometimes. I mean, I like them because the pockets are deep, but you make underwear, pants, hats, shirts.
The whole thing.
It's awesome.
Thank you very much.
It's terrific.
Thanks for joining us.
Thank you.